Welcome to Arcadia. Major news rocked the D&D world this past weekend. The next edition of D&D is not only confirmed, but also set to come in just 2 years. And from what I could understand, this could be the last ever edition of Dungeons & Dragons. And I'm not sure that's necessarily a good thing. Let me tell you why. So, Wizards of the Coast released a video last weekend revealing that they have been working on the next generation of Dungeons & Dragons, for now codenamed as ONE D&D. And we saw this coming. We knew it was a matter of time until D&D turned the page into a new iteration of the game. However, some things that were said make me feel like they mean this to be the final edition of Dungeons & Dragons. Chris Perkins said something to the effect of, "We are in a stage where everyone is already satisfied with the game, so we don't need a new edition, we don't need to think of it that way, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, we just need to keep adding more stuff and improving what is already there." And that kind of made me wonder, okay, but that's what you've been doing for these past 8 years. Why do you need to call it ONE D&D to keep doing the same thing? I noticed people were avoiding like hell calling it the next edition of the game too, and I think that's for a very good reason, which basically boils down to marketing. 5th edition has by far been the most popular and successful edition of the game since its release by TSR. Up until now, every edition eventually reached the end of its life cycle and gave way to a new edition of the game, but 5th edition got so big that it became hard to see how could this train ever be stopped. Think about all the books that we already bought for this edition, even all the content that we created for it. How big of a riot would happen if suddenly they said they were giving us this new edition that we didn't ask for, and all that content would be thrown into the trash? If a new edition came out now, people would probably keep playing 5th edition for half a decade or so, making the new edition a big sales flop. What happened in 4th edition was probably kind of similar to this, and that is why most people were expecting a half edition, in this case 5.5, with some rules being changed, some corrections being made, but in essence nothing more than just a pruning of what was already a well-oiled machine. And much of what was said in the official video really sounds that way. The core books are being revised, with new rules being introduced, some others being streamlined. The character creation is being revamped, as we saw in the Unearthed Arcana, but everything will be backwards compatible. That was the promise. So if ONE D&D will be 5.5, why are they so reluctant to call it a new edition or a half edition? Now, this is only my personal opinion, but apart from the obvious marketing reason, I think that this is also because this isn't the last half edition that they are planning. From the way they keep repeating that D&D has transcended editions and all that, even the name ONE D&D, I think they want to turn 5th edition into League of Legends, basically. And instead of releasing a completely new game every few years with a new and hopefully improved system, they will shift their design philosophy to making patches. Or in other words, ONE D&D is D&D 5.1. In a few years they will release 5.2, then 5.3, and so on. Whenever they feel like an update is in order, either because of fan feedback or because of corporate pressure to sell more books, I think they will release new patches of rules. No new edition, just an iterative waterfall of patches, which means that 5th edition will be the last edition of Dungeons & Dragons. 6th edition will never see the light of day unless the whole staff of Wizards of the Coast is changed and a new team wants to make their own thing. Now, is this good or is this bad? Honestly, I don't know. This shift in paradigm is so big that I'm having trouble forecasting what will come to be in the future. On one hand, I worry about all the other RPGs out there. I fear that if the D&D core rules stabilize and never change from now on, there will be even less reasons for people to try other RPGs. Learning new rule sets was normal in the past, even for people who only play D&D, because editions changed with time. If the D&D rules become stale and static, will the perceived barrier of learning an entire new system be even greater for new players, so they just stop trying other stuff altogether? I'm not really sure. Maybe the opposite effect will manifest. The rules of D&D can become so stale that it drives even more people to try other systems. I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. I'm just slightly fearful. But there is one other big disadvantage that I foresee with this new approach that might affect everyone playing, which will be the fracture of what is the D&D experience. Because everything so far is neatly split in editions. If you like 4th edition but don't like 5e and you want to play D&D, you can simply look for a group playing specifically 4th edition. If 5th edition becomes this huge train of new rules and concepts being added one after the other, but everything is still called 5th edition, since they did promise backwards compatibility after all, how will people distinguish between the two experiences? If the playtest material they just released with some of the ONE D&D new rules becomes definitive, spellcasters will no longer crit on natural 20s. The monsters will never crit at all. Your character will be able to have mixed ancestries between every possible ancestry in the game, so technically you could play half Tricrine, half Tabaxi. Now, for some players, this will be cool as hell, so they will be 100% for ONE D&D. For others, it will not be so appealing. What will become of those? And the people in the middle? Will you always be forced to play with the most recent patch? Will you be able to only use what you want? And if that's so, when you sit at the table, how can you know what kind of experience you are up for? I know that house rules have been around for decades and they kinda present the same problem, and these kind of assumptions are exactly what should be discussed in a session 0. But that's when we are talking just about a few couple of tweaks the DM has made. If it's an entire system, how will the DM be able to convey to the players exactly the rule set being used without listing all of it? Will they have to go something like, sorry, I use pages 1 to 155 from the 2014 Player's Handbook and pages 30 to 65 of the 2024 Player's Handbook, plus the ancestries from Volo's Guide to Monsters, but with the new system of character origins from page 1 to 14 in the 2024's new Player's Handbook. I mean, it just seems messy to me. I think it will not be as bad as this while there are only 2 sets of rules, 2014 and 2024, but if they keep adding patches, I'm afraid that things can get complicated. But maybe I'm brewing a storm in a glass of water. Maybe this won't be an issue at all, and some of the new rules released do seem promising, if slightly problematic in some occasions. I like the new conditions, although I'm not quite so sure about the new crit mechanics. The skills they gave to ancestries also seem really cool, although the new Ardling ancestry seems kind of weird to me. And I think that the fact they organized all spells in just 3 lists, Arcane, Divine, and Primal, is very interesting. I just hope that they revised the classes so that they're more distinguishable from each other, since most of what made, for example, a bard different from a wizard was actually the spell list. They also announced they are building a D&D digital game experience, which just means they're building a virtual tabletop. The footage seems really amazing, and I'm sure that some people will love it. Personally, it's not for me. I prefer playing at the table, it conveys a whole different experience, and honestly, I bet my money it will be absolutely crawling with microtransactions for unlocking minis and terrain and new dungeons and all that kind of stuff. I'm not terribly convinced it's going to stick, but I could be wrong. Let's wait and see. Anyway, this was just my quick reaction to these news. They did say they're going to release new Unearthed Arcana material for ONE D&D playtest every month from now until 2024. Would you like it for me to review those new rules anytime a new one comes out? If that's something you'd be interested in, let me know in the comments down below in the Underdark. And if you like D&D, you'll probably be interested in watching some of my other videos. Here are 2 for you to start, one for players, one for DMs. Thank you for watching, I'm the first Arcadian, and I hope to see you in my next video, and in many more D&D editions to come.